If you've ever tucked into a pint of your favorite frozen treat and felt it was strangely airy, overly sweet, or refused to melt into a creamy liquid, you might have been a victim of the great dairy bait and switch. In the United States, the FDA has strict standards of identity for what can legally be labeled as ice cream. To earn that prestigious title, a product must contain at least 10% dairy milk fat and have an overrun, the amount of air whipped into it, of less than 100%. Many of the most popular brands in the freezer aisle fail these basic tests. Instead of using cream and milk, manufacturers swap in cheap vegetable oils, corn syrup, and whey protein concentrates to cut costs. These products are legally forced to use terms like frozen dairy dessert or non-dairy frozen dessert. While the packaging looks identical to real ice cream, the chemical reality inside is a dessert disaster, designed for shelf life and profit rather than nutrition and flavor. Here are 10 offenders that are technically fake ice cream. 1. Breyers Select Varieties. Why number 1? Once the gold standard of all natural ingredients, Breyers has famously transitioned many of its classic flavors to frozen dairy dessert. If you look closely at a tub of Breyers cookies and cream, you won't find the words ice cream anywhere on the front. This is because the company increased the amount of air and added corn syrup and gums to create a texture that doesn't meet the FDA's milk fat minimums. These frozen dairy desserts often contain ingredients like tarragum and carabine gum to mimic the thickness that fat usually provides. While it remains a household name, the shift in labeling was a major turning point in the industry, signaling a move toward industrial processing over traditional churning. 2. Halo Top. Why number 2? The darling of the guilt-free movement. Halo Top is technically a light ice cream or frozen dessert, depending on the specific line. To keep calories incredibly low, Halo Top swaps out heavy cream for skim milk and uses erythritol, a sugar alcohol, and stevia for sweetness. Because it lacks the 10% milk fat required for standard ice cream, its texture is often chalky or rock-hard straight out of the freezer. To fix this, they add significant amounts of prebiotic fiber and milk protein concentrate. While it's marketed as a health food, it is a highly engineered product that relies on air and sugar substitutes to fill the pint, making it a processed miracle rather than a dairy classic. 3. Friendly's Select Varieties. Why number 3? Another nostalgic brand that has quietly moved several of its budget-friendly flavors into the frozen dairy dessert category. The main indicator here is the overrun. Real ice cream is dense. These dessert versions are whipped with so much air that they feel light and fluffy, but lack the satisfying mouth coat of real fat. Friendly's uses a combination of whey and milk protein concentrates to maintain the structure of these aerated treats. When you melt a bowl of their frozen dairy dessert, it often turns into a foamy, marshmallow-like substance rather than a milky liquid. This is a clear sign that stabilizers and air are doing the heavy lifting instead of high-quality dairy. 4. Arctic Zero. Why number 4? Originally marketed as a fat-free treat, Arctic Zero was so far removed from dairy standards that it couldn't even be called light ice cream. For years, Arctic Zero was essentially flavored water, fava bean protein, and fiber. Because it contained zero milk fat, it was legally a non-dairy frozen dessert. Even their newer, light ice cream lines barely skate by the regulations. The primary issue for consumers is the frozen water texture. Without the lubricating power of milk fat, the body perceives the dessert as thin and icy. It relies heavily on guar gum and xanthan gum to prevent it from turning into a solid block of ice, making it a triumph of food science, but a failure of traditional dairy. 5. Dairy Queen Soft Serve. Why number 5? The cone with the curl is iconic, but the FDA forbids Dairy Queen from calling its signature treat ice cream. Dairy Queen Soft Serve only contains about 5% milk fat, which is exactly half of what is required to be called ice cream. DQ actually refers to it as reduced fat ice cream, or simply soft serve. While it is delicious, it contains a high amount of mono and diglycerides and carrageenan to keep it at that perfect, gravity-defying consistency. If they increased the fat to 10%, the machines wouldn't be able to dispense it with that same silky smoothness. It's a fake ice cream by design, optimized for the machine rather than the dairy standard. 6. Tafuti, better than yogurt. Why number 6? A pioneer in the vegan space. This frozen dessert replaces all dairy with soy protein and various oils. Since there is no milk involved, it is legally impossible for tafuti to be called ice cream. It is a non-dairy frozen dessert that relies on hydrogenated vegetable oils like palm and soybean to provide the creaminess that butterfat usually offers. These oils can be highly inflammatory and lack the nutritional profile of grass-fed dairy. While it serves a purpose for the lactose intolerant, the ingredient label is a long list of corn syrup solids and chemical thickeners. It's a classic example of an imitation product that mimics the experience of ice cream through laboratory-derived fats. 7. Ben & Jerry's non-dairy. Why number 7? Even the kings of Chunky and Monkey have to follow labeling laws. Their vegan pints are frozen desserts, not ice cream. These pints are made with almond milk or sunflower butter. While they are high quality, they cannot legally use the ice cream label because they lack animal-derived milk fat. To get that signature Ben & Jerry's density, they use a significant amount of coconut oil and starches. For consumers looking for clean labels, the non-dairy versions often have double the ingredients of their dairy counterparts to compensate for the missing proteins that help real ice cream hold its shape. They are delicious, but they are a high-calorie imitation designed for specific dietary preferences. 8. So delicious, coconut milk varieties. Why number 8? Like other plant-based options, these are labeled frozen desserts and rely heavily on tropical fats. Coconut milk is naturally high in saturated fat, which helps it mimic ice cream better than almond milk. However, it still lacks the specific milk solids needed for legal ice cream status. So Delicious often uses organic agave syrup and pea protein to round out the flavor and texture. The disaster here for some is the metabolic impact. Because these are often perceived as healthier, people eat more of them, even though they can be higher in processed sugars and stabilizers than a simple 4-ingredient pint of real, full-fat dairy ice cream. 9. Klondike Bars, Original. Why number 9? What would you do for a Klondike bar? If you wanted real ice cream, you might be disappointed to find they are frozen dairy desserts. If you look at the wrapper of an original Klondike bar, the words ice cream are notably absent. They use a lower-fat dairy blend that is heavily aerated. To make up for the lack of real ice cream richness, the bars are coated in a thick layer of chocolatey coating, which is itself an imitation of real chocolate, usually made with alkalized cocoa and soybean oil. The result is a treat that stays stable at room temperature longer than real ice cream, but provides a more waxy experience for your taste buds. 10. Blue Ribbon Classics, Pale. Why number 10? The giant 4-quart pails found at budget grocers are almost exclusively frozen dairy dessert. To keep the price point so low, manufacturers replace expensive cream with whey and modified whey. These pails are the most exposed because they often contain the highest overrun, air, and the most chemical stabilizers. Because they are so low in fat, they would be incredibly icy if not for the addition of polysorbate 80 and propylene glycol monostearate. These chemicals keep the dessert soft even when it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit in your freezer. It is a mass-produced product designed for volume over value, providing plenty of sweetness but very little actual dairy. How to spot a real pint. The frozen dessert aisle is a masterclass in deceptive marketing. When brands use words like creamy, velvety, or delightful without ever using the word ice cream, they are usually hiding a list of cheap fillers and vegetable oils. The transition to frozen dairy dessert wasn't about health. It was about the rising cost of dairy fat and the desire for products that could survive the supply chain without melting. Real ice cream is a simple pleasure that should be based on cream, milk, sugar, and eggs. To protect your health and your wallet, become a label detective. Turn the pint around and look for the standard of identity. If it says frozen dairy dessert, you are paying for air and emulsifiers. If you see ingredients like hydrogenated oil or corn syrup solids in the first 3 items, put it back. Opt for brands that list cream as the first ingredient and have a short, recognizable list of additives. By choosing real ice cream over frozen disasters, you get more satiety, better flavor, and fewer industrial chemicals in every scoop.